name is Daniel Moreno, and my partner for this project is Oliver Huey. And the focus of our project was to create a simple web application using PHP and MySql to access the Netflix database that Professor Hummel went over in class. So what is PHP? PHP was created in 1995 and was known as Personal Homepage, but later its name was revamped to be PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. And PHP is a general purpose scripting language that's used for web development today. And some big names that use PHP are Facebook, Yahoo, Wikipedia, and WordPress. So PHP is a dynamic language, which means that whenever you use any type of variable, you do not need to specify what kind of data you're going to be storing in the variable. So down here we have a small sample script, and the first line here, the PHP, that's just used to specify that that's the beginning of the PHP script. So our first variable that we created is var, and we initialize it to be the integer value 10. After that, we redefine it to be the string hello. Now, in between, we don't change the data type, we just change it right away. And when we use echo, it prints out hello the string. So that's an example of our dynamic language. So the setup that we use to create our server and web application, we use the Ubuntu OS, as well as Apache server, PHP, MySql database, and PHP-MyAdmin, which I'll explain in the next slide. The two scripts that we're mainly working with are index.php, which is where we're going to be running most of our SQL queries and connecting with the database and displaying our web application. And connect.php is what we're going to use to connect to the database from our PHP script. So PHP-MyAdmin is a web application that allows you to edit and view your database directly. So here on the left side we have Netflix, which is the name of our current database. And once you click on it, you can see the tables that are in it. So once we open the movies table, we can see that we have our movie ID numbers and movie names. And from here you can go to insert, and you can just insert a movie ID and a movie name here, or delete. So in our connect.php file, we first have to set up a couple credentials that we need to use to access the database. So the first thing is the server name, which in our case is localhost, since our database and our PHP files are on the same machine. So our username and password would also be set to a default value, which is root. And the name of our database is Netflix, so that's what we put for the DB name. The next variable that we have is con, which stores a connection object that is returned from the MySQLi function call, which just allows us to connect to the database whenever we need to. And this last if statement just checks if that connection was created without any issues. And also at the top of our index.php, we use include connect.php, which allows us to connect to the database without having to retype all the code that we typed originally inside of connect.php. And this is useful because if we create any other PHP scripts besides index, we can just include connect.php and be able to access the database quickly.
All right. So I will be showing everybody how this script looks like and the HTML. So here, this is pretty much our script that we created, and I'll explain like maybe a part of it here. And inside our index.php, we have this HTML code that generates on the left side here that generates this form here. And what's happening is form action equals to index.php, meaning this form, once you hit the submit button, it will go to this link right here. And in this case, it's just to ourselves. And how we store the user's input is through this text box here. And once they hit, for example, 7 here, it's going to store that value 7 inside this variable called getMovieID. And I'll demonstrate this through the website. So we hit 7 right here, submit. So let's see. If you look closely at the the URL link here, you can see that it passed in the value, the variable name, and also the value it holds. And so getMovieID equals to 7 here. And from that, go to the next page, next slide. We talk about the PHP side now. We have ID equals to getMovieID, and get is pretty much like a PHP super global variable. And what it does is just targets like whatever was passed in the URL. So in this case, we pass in an ID of equals to 7. Next up, we have the SQL variable, and this builds up our SQL statement. So in this case here, select everything from movies where MovieID equals to 7. Okay, 7, and then later we're going to run this query through using con query. And if you guys remember, con was an object that we created in connect.php. And since it was successful, we're going to run a query method on it with this SQL statement, and then we store that result inside result variable. And so next I want to display what happens when we put in a quotes inside our movie name. And so if you guys remember from way back when Professor Homo was talking about SQL, he would type in the word Odal as a movie name, and it would stop, it pretty much crash the program. However, for us in right, Odal 2 or something 20. Okay, right, in the movie name here, if we put in a quote here, it would crash in Professor Homo's program. But here, let's see what happens. Right, and so SQL statement here, I pretty much printed out our statement, and so we see here that this is an invalid SQL statement with an extra quote at the end that ends the SQL prematurely, and it gives us a gives us an error message. So our database is pretty much protected. If we display the database here, nothing was affected. And to get around that issue, we just have to use something called MySql escape string. So let's enter that in. Let me just uncomment that code out, and then comment this out, and then so now if we do insert movie name, so DOM number, let's do 5. Submit. Now let's look at the SQL statement that was fixed by MySql escape string. Basically, at the end here, it escaped our our apostrophe, and now if you try to view the database, there it is. It's okay. The database added that just fine. And now, if you remember the slide after afterwards, Professor also talked about the MySQL injection attack. So if we try to do an injection attack here, to drop table, we do a submit. Here's our SQL statement. Initially, this is a correct statement here. However, afterwards, we tried running a command telling it to drop the table movies. However, it gives us an error message that prevented our table being dropped. So if we try to show the table again, it's fine, nothing was deleted. And so we show that here that PHP and MySql has a basic level against these injection attacks. And that's about it. Thank you very much.